evening. Welcome to the June 30th, 2025 special Troy City Council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for the roll call for Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga?
Here.
Councilmember Chanda?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gunn?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
All present this evening. First up on the agenda is public comment. We do have one person signed up. Same rules as in the council chamber, 3 minutes. Joey Colby is the resident who signed up. Please stand at the mic. Recognize it will amplify, but it is being picked up for those watching at home.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Hello, council. Hello, city staff. Hello, Mr. Mayor. My name is Joey Colby Bernert. I am here to support the proposed 0.9 mil 20-year rate to fund the new public library. The current library is over 50 years old. It is outdated. It no longer meets the basic needs of the community. The building is too small, the systems are failing, and there is no room for it to grow. It was not built for the way libraries function today. This proposal would raise the full $75 million needed to build a new library, not part of it, all of it. And the longer that we wait, the more it will cost. Construction costs are not going down. Patching the current building is not feasible, and it will not fix what is wrong. A new library is not a luxury, it is basic infrastructure. This is a place where people can go to apply for jobs, do their homework, get homework help, attend early literacy programs, learn English, practice speaking English, access the internet, study together, and find safety and quiet. Our residents rely on it every day. I would also like to take a moment to thank Director Emily Dumas and Assistant Director Philip Quick. They have made the current library work far beyond what the building was designed to handle. The staff deliver excellence every day. We should match their work with a facility that supports it. A 20-year term spreads the cost fairly. A 0.9 millage rate is reasonable. The goal is clear: fund the full project, avoid delays, and give the city a library built for the next 50 years, not the last 50. Thank you, and this is me giving you a thumbs up.
That concludes those that have signed up for public comment. We now move on to D1, business statement of special meeting notice. D1 is the 2025 bond proposal discussion. I will turn it over to City Manager Nastasi to get things started.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for being here. I also want to thank city staff because they're always great for the questions at the end. I want to thank the public for being here too and being engaged. With that being said, I'm going to go over just a little brief history, brought us here. In the packet is much more comprehensive, but I'll just hit some of the highlights here. So about a year ago in 2024, we were presented with the library strategic plan. Rethink Libraries at the time suggested at least 90,000 square feet for the library with an estimated cost to 29 to 39 million. We received direction to pursue possibilities of the new larger library as well as funding options, including a bond proposal. It's weird, I gotta keep turning my head because I don't have a screen. Back in January, we met for the Capital Conference, and then in February for some follow-up. We were discussing all the different capital needs within the city with limited funding. Council confirmed assumptions that included an interest in pursuing a capital bond proposal for the various needs. During the capital meeting, we started with capital projects. I believe it was right around 194 million. And then it was brought down to the green line and orange line, the green at 165 million, and then the orange at 112. And at that time, we had some estimates too. Then after doing due diligence, council was presented with the bond proposal of $112 million and provided consensus to staff to move forward. This included a new library, streets, parks and rec, and public safety, all in the one package. Council also held a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, and that's where HBM presented with the estimate of cost and schematic design. And they did come back, HBM, this with a total cost of just north of 75 million for the library. Also, there's some other considerations that they added. This was pulled right from their slide. Some programs for child enhancement for their activities, outdoor furniture, and additional spacing if wanted or needed. They gave some options there with prices. So here we have our streets, parks and rec, and public safety still the same. The only difference between these two is we added the 25 million to the library, which gives the grand total of 137 million instead of the 112 million. And this kind of breaks it down. So we're looking at 90,000 square feet for the library at 75.87 million. And then our streets with the project, so Coolidge, many updates and repairs to that. Also, most of Waddles, and then the various is for local roadways. This is just a real quick recap. And then Parks and Rec is 17 million. So we have pickleball, Park 7.5 million, Troy Farm 3.2, Trails and Pathways 3 million, and our Community Center 2.4. And then the last piece is the public safety piece for 10 million for fire apparatus replacement and body worn cameras and technology upgrades. So this brings us to the $137 million in staff, and I got to give credit to Rob. Was it at a lunch meeting you had? You were speaking to some folks and gave some options for financing. So on the left here, to have it just under $1 million, it would be the 3 projects would be financed for 20 years for 62 million, and then the library itself financed over 30, which because it is a 30-plus year asset, probably 50 or 75 years. The interest rate's a little bit higher for that because it's a 30-year, and this is projected, so this is very conservative at the 4.75. And on the other side here for 137 million, what we originally talked about, everything going under the 20-year financing. So the interest rate would be a little bit lower, we're projecting, and then both sides, of course, for the taxable value growth rate. So if we take 2026 estimated tax for the average taxable value, which in Troy is 175,000. I'll start on the right first. You see the orange 1.1 would be $16.52 a month, and then the 0.95 for the other financing over the 30 years is 13.86, and that's $2.66 difference. And this is the annual difference between the two. One is $166 and the other one $198. You know, I didn't think I'd go through it that quick, but I wanted to leave time for discussion. We did put this whole packet together, gave it to everyone ahead of time, want everyone to be able to look through it, digest it. I know you guys are going to have some great questions for both myself and my staff, and you guys are going to have discussion how you guys want to proceed, so I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mike. Let's start with some questions first. I have a question that I just kind of, maybe an elephant in the room for those who are paying attention to what's being talked about in the community. There's a little bit, a year ago, the Rethinking Libraries thought, 29 to 39 million for a new library, and then today we're at 75 million a year later. And I think I have a pretty good grasp on why that number ended up where it is, but I'm wondering if someone, I'll start with you because you can delegate as you see fit. From the city perspective, how you, one, can communicate that, and then where those numbers came from, and how best to explain them. And you mentioned, I'll give you a hint. Earlier today, when we were talking, you talked about these are actually pretty conservative numbers in the sense that you're expecting overruns and such, and that's why that number, one of the reasons the number creeped up to where it is. But can you speak a little bit to that, or have someone speak about a year later why it's essentially almost, it could be double?
I could start and then probably turn it over to Kurt. He's already smiling. That's very true. Businesses, they're going to be very, very conservative with their numbers. When it originally came out with Rethink Libraries, it was 29 to 39 million. And then when we worked internally and came up with ours and figured in inflation, and when we came up with 50 million, a lot of people said, wow, that's really high. The school district recently did some projects, and I believe they're right around $460 a square foot. So our estimate, at 50 million, I think was a reasonable estimate. I don't know how things are going to be down the road, so it's a guesstimate, and until we actually go out, put it out for bid, and get numbers back, I'm hoping they'll be lower, of course, but with that being said, Kurt, any other?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, when we gave the original estimate of $50 million from staff side in the capital conference, it's $500 to $550 a square foot. And when we first met with HBM, we gave that number to them, and they even said, that's a really good number, we can build off of that. And through the process, with all the things going on in the world and the economy, they look at nationally what libraries are costing, and they were seeing upwards to $700 to $800 a square foot. Now, mind you, our projections here, we're trying to project out, because our construction wouldn't happen for 2 years. So we're trying to project what the economy and what the inflation rate is going to be over the next 2 years. So again, that conservative number is in there, but those estimates do include, so it's a guess at a guess. I think what's also important to note is when we were talking about the construction of the library, it was just the construction of the library, what we had not discussed was what we call the soft costs. So soft costs would include the firm to actually go into detailed design, put together the bid documentations, do the construction administration, do all those soft costs or administrative things that weren't really part of the actual construction of the library. Those soft costs are in that $75 million number, and I think that totals nearly $8 million of the $75 million.
Additional questions? Councilor Chamberlain-Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple questions. First is about the road street funding. 35 million is what I wrote down. So what would happen if, there is at the state level, they're able to work out a road funding deal, we get some money. I did speak during my board retreat with MML a couple weeks ago that they do think something is going to likely happen. Maybe not the level of getting the 17 million that Senator Weber had shared with us, but something. But there's a chance that the budget may not even be finalized till September. So I know we can't wait on that. But what would happen if, there is some money available? Is it just that's a bonus to this?
Well, we would be very transparent, and it's a lot to do with the timing when the money comes in. So if everything passes through and different things like that, we can make adjustments no matter where we're at with it, because as you go, you pull the funds out, and then we wouldn't need those funds, or if we got grants for other areas, or you could also shorten the loan, what I was told. But with that, I would like to turn over to Rob, because I want to make sure I hit all the points that you're looking at.
So to answer that question too, is what we can also do is, as Kurt said, we're not going to hit construction for 2 years with the library. With the roads, it's going to be a little bit different. We have to space those road projects out. So we would start with, I'd have to ask Scott which one first, but we would start with, let's just say we start with Waddles first.
Coolidge.
First, but so a year, if this funding from the state, which again, there's going to be something, but I'm always very cautious. I've always been cautious when it comes to the state. I don't think it's going to be at the amount they say. So if it came in as high as that, then what we would do is then we say, wow, we got all this extra money. We don't need from the state. We don't need it for Waddles. Then we just wouldn't execute that part of the bond.
Okay, so you can do that. Okay, that's
Yeah.
something I needed to understand on that. Okay.
And how that impacts the residents then is
Yes.
then we wouldn't have as much debt and the millage rate would be lower.
Okay, and that would be progressively then at different years? How is it?
Correct.
Okay, so they would feel that later. That might be hard to communicate at some point, but we'll figure that out. Second quick question was about, in the memo, it talked about community engagement. I know that you, City Manager Nastasi, did Troy Talks. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what that entailed, so I can also explain that to residents, kind of where some of this came from?
Yeah, we're ready to hit the ground running with all the communication and talks and town hall meetings and all that, but we had information, but not all of it. We need, the consensus and the vote, the resolution to be able to move forward. But do I have Courtney in the back?
Hi. So are you asking about the community engagement leading up to tonight, or
Yes.
moving forward from tonight?
Yes, that's what the memo referred to.
Leading up to tonight, we had surveys that have gone out. I think the last one was about a year ago now. There was ones previously which also talked about priorities such as parks and recreation, roads, the library. Obviously, the library has done their own extensive community engagement leading up to this point. And then at the Troy talks, the ones that I was at up to here, I know we've had residents come up and express interest in the bond proposal, question, what it would be, talk about what some of their priorities are. And I'm not sure exactly what's been asked in the last couple of months, but over the winter there was absolutely, and people were hearing that this was being discussed at the city council level, and so I know that there is interest from the community. And there was more questions and trying to get information. I wouldn't say anybody came out strongly opposing or supporting, but they were more fact-finding missions.
Thank you. Mr. Ibach, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gunn.
The main question is, as it relates to the construction, 75 million, 2 years is a long time. What kind of contingency do we have in place? Like, it's not going to be 75 million in 2 years. The construction costs are going to go up, materials are going to go up. What do we do at that point?
Well, I personally wasn't hoping it would cost that much, but we do have fund balance, we have library fund balance, we have different things, because I'm really big on promises made, promises kept. So all these projects, we're going to make sure, and we'll be transparent every step of the way, with costs. But like Kurt said, it's a guess upon a guess. So the way we sit right now with everything we presented, we're fine with that. This one slide, I wanted to bring up real quick again, right here. Like if council, that second floor where the terrace is, okay, that 4,000 square feet more for 2.4 million, we can use library fund balance that if at the end of the day you guys want to be at 94. I like the idea of having more inside space and a little bit less outside. There'll still be a terrace, but it's Michigan. You're not going to use it 365 days of the year. And there was discussions and talks earlier about more study space and more opportunities, to be out of the elements. And this would do that. So that's part of the same thing. So if it's getting tight, then okay, maybe we won't do something like that. There's stadium seating inside in the children area. Yeah, I think that, what was the cost of that, Emily? 2 million?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah.
1 million.
We can make changes there. So as we go, the building's not built yet, we could kind of subtle changes and hopefully make up that difference. I'm pretty confident of that, and I think they're very conservative, I feel, with those numbers, especially what I've been seeing for construction around in Michigan.
Okay. What's the library balance fund now?
Fund balance currently is 3.6 million. We're about to bank another, I would say, 700,000. So conservatively, I would say that by the start of construction, we could probably have between $5.5 to $6 million in fund balance. And one other thing I just want to say about that cost is the estimators do project forward too. So they build that into their projections to start construction.
Yeah, it's not today's cost, is what she's saying. It's 2 years.
Yeah, the bond that's approved is the amount, and that is fixed for the life of the bond authorization. So if we enact the bond in 5 years, it's the same amount. If we did it in 10 years, it'd be the same amount. We can only go up to the 132 or whatever it is that we get, 137, whatever it is we get approved. So, yep.
Additional questions before we fully discuss? Councilmember Chanda.
For the library, also, I don't know how much we discussed earlier, like other costs like buying furniture and all the other stuff, is that included in that?
Yes, it's the soft cost.
Soft cost.
No, it's not part of soft cost, it's actually part of an interior.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a separate line. Yeah, it's part of that 68 million right there, the interior.
Okay, the original had, okay.
Except apparently outdoor furniture.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of looking at, is 500,000 for outdoor furniture.
Yes.
And how about and I think it mentions 2.5% increase in taxable value, that looks pretty conservative to me. Does that include the the new constructions and things like that, or is it just?
That does, so that is conservative. If you run our numbers over the last 20 years, you'll see that it's been higher than that. But again, we have to be conservative, like Frank said, we have to be conservative when we build these numbers.
Yeah, I mean, the more conservative, the better it is in terms of, I think we're not going to exceed our expenditure. I mean, you may have more revenue than we're thinking, but okay, that's good to know. Okay.
Councilmember Hamilton. Thanks, Mayor. So when you're saying these numbers are conservative, typically when we budget, we say conservative, that means kind of, keeping it low. In this sense, you're saying we're trying to include everything we can imagine. So we're saying it could be the higher end of what we anticipate now. Things happen, stuff happens, but when you say conservative, it's like we want to make sure we're covering everything and that we don't ever need to go for more.
Correct.
Yeah, so you're saying
Yes.
we're at the high end of
That's
what you think
what
the
I
range
feel
would be.
in
Right.
speaking with staff, looking at the numbers and what's going on in today's world. Yes.
And right, and as we talked about earlier, the bond authorization is the max amount. So we always have the option to do less bonds if the need ends up being less, or if in the end we decide we want to do less, we have that option too. We're authorized for the 137, but we can always do less. Just like with millage approvals, that's the max you can enact, but you can always do less. Most communities.
I have a quick question. So tonight, obviously, we've been presented with the 0.9 versus 1.1 potential millage options that would go on the ballot. So obviously, we can't take a vote tonight or during this kind of forum, but are we supposed to give direction? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, looking for a consensus, and then next council meeting in 2 weeks, we'd do a resolution, which way you guys would like to go, and then Lori would work on the bond language.
Or if there is clear consensus, we can have proposed bond language to you at the next meeting. Certainly, there are deadlines. We've got to, should happen in July if at all possible. Also because of the public education component as well. We want to get that started sooner rather than later. So, but yeah, if you have consensus tonight, that would be helpful. We can bring it back to you there. It's not binding, of course, but it would be really helpful.
Quick question on that, Lori, so we can begin public education as soon as we have a resolution that's gone forward and if we vote to move that forward?
Yes, I think the bond language would be helpful as I think a necessary component to the public education piece of it, because we need to know what it is that is going to be on the ballot first.
Well, the question is versus it has to get approved by the state first. I don't know if there's a process by which before
You can start as
soon as we have, okay.
Councilmember Howard, did you have a question?
Yeah, a reminder, the last time city administration or city council went to the community for any type of bond was, what year?
1999.
And they were paid off, there were actually three, and they were paid off 2 years ago,
Do you know that bond, what it was?
Yeah. 20.
at least.
Yeah.
Time is flying. So this will be the first time since 1999 that we've done this. And, we keep talking a lot about the library, and I think because the library obviously made it into the media with the building issues that it's having, not making it into the media were a lot of crisis points that we've been wrestling with back a couple years ago. And I think there's a misperception that, there's a library need, so we're hitching a wagon on with some other needs that we have. When actually we were talking about these other needs, and we even at one point were looking at 1.5 mils for the library, and because these other needs, they're for real. Both keep me up at night. So going back, maybe you can pull that chart back up that had, I guess I don't want missed in our conversation about what we're deliberating on. We talked roads, and I really appreciated the question about potential state funding on roads, and you know what, I've learned the hard way over the years, I don't think we can count on that. I think we have to decision make, and it's good to know that we can then pull back if need be. I'm not counting on it, but boy, let's say that, and then maybe they'll prove me wrong. The other was public. Public's roads are for sure, and I think the public is very aware of the roads and seeing. It's been years since we really did a full-throated investment on them and work, and you can see the wear and tear on the local neighborhood roads and the main roads. So I think that's obvious. The public safety piece of this, can we talk about that a bit and what you're looking to bake into this?
Anybody from the fire department?
I'll take it.
Okay.
So with the fire apparatus replacement, that's basically 2 ladders and a fire truck or 2, and then body worn cameras for the police. That is the second generation, I believe. Josh, we're on second generation.
Right, we currently have Axon body worn cameras. All our officers have them, they're issued to them. If we're going to continue that, we will continue that, we'll find a way to pay for it. But this will allow us to improve that technology, go into the next, because they're going to hit their life cycle, go into the next purchase of body worn cameras for all our officers, and then add on the technology like the improvements that they're doing with AI and helping make our officers more efficient, writing police reports, using the body worn cameras, using virtual reality training that is being developed currently and is being offered by Axon. So that type of technology upgrades for our officers.
I think there's another point to be made about when was the last time the city paid for a fire apparatus, Rob?
Yeah, that's right. The last few have been from our federal government and our state government. So it's been a while. And what happens there's, as we've talked to you guys before about our capital plan, when we do have to purchase a fire truck for close to $2 million, then other things suffer, like the appearance of City Hall or anything, roofs or things.
There's been a lot of federal money flowing the last several years, and
that's all dry.
we know that's over.
That's over.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and are we still encountering the long lead time that's required for?
It's 3 years now.
Yeah.
One truck was 3, and I don't know if it was a ladder, but the other one was 5. So 3 and 5 were the 2 numbers I recall.
Yep.
Okay. Can I keep going?
Sure.
I get beat up about our recreation programs too. And so I'd like to take a minute to understand again and be reminded about what we're talking about, including in the bond for Parks and Recreation. Hey, Brian. Hi. Remind us.
So for the community center part, that's for replacing lockers, doing work to the pool, the gym floor needs to be redone, painting the entire building, lighting upgrades. I mean, all stuff. We have had the HVAC redone, we have had the roof redone, but all the stuff inside the building, most of that, switching from regular lights to LEDs, changing filters for the sand, things like that. As far as the parks portion of it, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk about the parks. So when we look at the parks, there's the blue part of the parks, there's really no new amenities. It's replacing existing play structures, it's replacing existing pavilions, just some other general site work in the parks. When we get to Troy Farm, there's we're looking at possibly developing that into a park with a restroom facility, pavilion, a play structure, and then trails, obviously extending our trails, and then the opportunity to build another pickleball court in the city.
Okay, so
Do you have a quick follow-up to that, Councilmember?
Where's the pickleball court going? Do we know yet?
We do not know 100% yet.
It would likely be a lighted court. This one, the $1 million would be a lighted court, so it would be somewhere away from residents.
Okay.
In the original discussion was the community center, if we could incorporate it with the library, and so.
Yes, the $1 million for the pickleball court, because of one of the locations we've considered at the community center would require a restroom facility, so you're not walking across the parking lot to use the restroom, so.
Go ahead, did you follow up to that?
Yeah, I mean, a follow-up on the trails, I mean, do you have anything in mind, or is that the new land that we acquired? I mean, is that?
Exactly, it's that connection from Waddles all the way up to Long Lake, so the property we just recently acquired, that council approved, it would be to construct that portion of the trail.
It's almost like almost a 2-mile long trail if you start from the community center to the Dock Park Trail to
That's
a
correct.
continuation of that. So, okay, good. Thanks.
I know we're discussing the Parks and Rec master plan. I think I saw a survey going out on that. What is the timeline on that? I know if this gets approved, then this becomes a part of that plan and public engagement will continue on that. The projects aren't set in stone, and as we go and think about the future, if we have a brand new library, that whole area becomes like a central park of Troy, and there's more we could do too, and this funding and future planning could potentially open that up to a lot more options as well, right? So I guess my question,
I don't know if that's a question, but I agree.
The question more is the Parks and Rec master plan, how is that process looking like? When is that going to be kind of finalized and come to us? Do you anticipate?
Right. Yeah, so right now, we're taking the survey. The results will come out after Troy Days, approximately around then. Then the plan will be put together. The hope is to come to council either in late December, early January, and have it approved by the end of January.
Okay, so there would be time to, if the bond is approved, to incorporate that level of funding along with the year-to-year capital allocation as part of the plan.
Yes, you could.
So I'll just say to that is 90% or maybe 80% of what's being proposed in the Parks and Recreation pie chart there is a lot of maintenance stuff.
Right, of course.
So that's what we're looking for, so it doesn't have to compete. So, I mean, if I had to put a paycheck on it, Trails and Pathways probably would score pretty high because it consistently has over the last 20 years, right? The Troy Farm, that'll be interesting to see how that pans out, if there's any interest. But for the parks, the community center, all of that is more maintenance than actually creating something new and improved.
Right, and it's like if the bond doesn't pass and we went on the same path, those things would compete in the capital fund. These are covered by the bond, then we can start exploring more new things, I guess you could say, in Parks and Rec world. Right, and that will come to council, and, but it opens up a lot of possibilities. Everyone's always saying, you know, Rochester Hills has Innovation Hills, like why don't we have a park that's that amazing? It's like, well, they also have 20% higher taxes than us, so, and that's how it goes. So I'm excited as that is a piece of it, that it opens us up for a long-term Parks and Rec master plan that can do a lot more.
I would argue that we'll keep up with the cities around us because residents say to me repeatedly, we're behind. And I agree.
Yeah.
We're behind on even maintenance at this point.
Yep.
And we have been for several years. So with a capital fund that's with the line going like this.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to revisit that because these are discussions that we have repeatedly, and yet it's easy to forget between each one why we're having the discussions. My question then related to .9, which if I'm being candid sounds politically nice. It's under 1, so it's .9. But the .9, you mentioned that the 30-year piece of that would have a higher interest rate.
Yes. And
Yes.
That's just because if the farther you go out, think about your mortgage. Think about this personally, your house. If you went to go do a 15-year mortgage or a 30-year mortgage, the 15-year mortgage is a lower interest rate. It's just because on the long end of the curve, the last 10 years, from year 21 to year 30, interest rates are just a little bit higher. Only reason why.
Okay.
Frank, could you go one more? It might be helpful to talk.
Number there.
13. Wrong way. The debt schedule.
Oh, at the end?
Yeah.
Okay. You want the first or the second one?
This one's fine. So those numbers, that's just math, and it's based on an estimated taxable value. So what that tax rate is actually gonna be when that year comes is whatever the math says it has to be. So if the economy is good and taxable value is going up more than assumed, that number is lower. If we go through another recession and value goes down, this number is higher. So this is best educated guess based on, we know how much money is being proposed to borrow, the term and the interest rate, and we make an assumption about taxable value. But ultimately, that number is going to get calculated every year. Whatever that number needs to be to service the debt, that's what it's going to be. And we've, at shorthand, been referring to it as, 9/10 and 1.1, but that number is going to be whatever it needs to be to pay that debt based on what the city's actual taxable value is in a given year.
Well, let's shift to the 0.9 versus the 1.1 conversation. Could you put that slide back up with the two different options? And I have a couple of questions related to that specifically, and then we really got to dive into that. My first question, I guess, based on what Bob just said, is just so I'm understanding, if will you go back to the
One more.
one more, that one. If with the higher interest rate on the 0.9 option, where you split the library cost out over 30 years and the other portion over 20 years, is that actually a 30-year bond for all and we're just paying off that first portion in 20 years? Or is it two separate loans, essentially? But my actual initial question is, from a legal standpoint, are those separate ballot questions? How is that worded and how does that work out?
Right, yeah, and so, again, you could, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk about this, because if it's 0.9 mils, the language on the ballot could say up to 30 years. So your choices are 30 years at 0.9 mils or 20 years at 1.1 mil. So those are two options that you have.
And is that then discretionarily done by, let's say, Rob or whomever does, and when it's time to borrow the money for the roads, okay, we're doing this in 20-year terms, even though we have up to 30 based on approved language? Who makes that,
Yes, it
what's
would
the
be,
mechanism
yeah,
for
it
doing
would
that?
just be what do we need and how many bonds do we need to issue and all of that. So, but the language itself, the language, if to make sure that you have the flexibility that you're gonna need, if it's 0.9, it's gonna be up to 30 years. If it's 1.1, the language is gonna say up to 20 years. So, just wanted to make sure that was clear. You do also have an option of dividing them up if that's what council wants to do. The consensus has been to not do that to this point in time, so I don't have language for that. But that is another potential option that council could pursue as well.
Well, upon that, let's say we choose the one on the left, 30-year option. And what would be the ballot language? Not to exceed 0.9 mil, or is that, or you just said the amount?
The amount
of 137.
Yes, it'd be 137. Shall the city of Troy borrow the principal amount not to exceed $137 million and issue its bonds?
And in our educational literature, it would say that would roughly translate into 0.9 mil per year.
Right, and on the millage, on the bond language, you have an estimate, kind of based on numbers here, based on a 2.5% increase in taxable value, based on the current floating interest rates. Of course, interest rates change every day, so the actual interest rates.
So if you look at
in 2 years.
Well, too many cooks in the kitchen. Let's have the experts like David.
If you look at the bond proposals, the examples we provided a while back, there's two numbers that show up on the ballot. One is, it's estimated that next year it's going to cost that much, and on average, it's going to be that much to retire the debt. So those are the two numbers that actually show up on
the ballot.
So that top one and bottom one.
Right.
Okay, that's helpful.
But the thing that's fixed is that $137 million that we're borrowing.
Yeah, the thing that's fixed is the principal sum and the term.
And the term, okay.
And we won't know the interest rates until.
Yeah, that is a flex, that's variable anyway, so.
And they'll likely be sold in multiple series.
And Mayor, just to, also, you also asked about, the other thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to specify what it's going to be financing. Now, it'll be, you really want to be as transparent as you can because you want to make sure that the voters know exactly what it is that they're getting. So that language will also be included. So it's a little more difficult to say 30 years for the library and 20 years for all of these other, but you can do that. And the reason why you have to have the 30, that you're able to do the 30 years for the library is because the useful life of that is longer than the other things to be financed.
We can go back to the slide again. So I guess my question for my colleagues here is, what do you think? That's the point. I mean, what's your general feeling on these two options? Does anyone want to go first?
I can start. I'll just start because I have been talking to a lot of people, and what I have been saying to people so far is just a conversation, but I have been saying around 1 mil. I've been saying about $12 to $15 per month on average. Talking about all these different things we've talked about, talking about them together. And I was actually blown away by how supportive people are around the library, as well as when you talk about Coolidge and you talk about public safety. They're like, of course, our fire department needs the best equipment. We need to support them. So that's where just between the two, the 0.9 falls into what I have already been kind of talking to people about and kind of what people have, mentioned a comfort about. The 1.1, it's not a lot more, but what I saw on average 17 a month, it's a bit more than what I've been talking to people about at this point. So at this point, I'm comfortable with 0.9, and I do feel like there is community support based on people I have talked to about that. But I'd love to hear if others have talked about some different numbers and what you've heard from residents.
Sure, thank you. Councilmember Hamilton?
Yeah, the numbers nerd in me is that the cost of something should be spread out amongst its useful life. And so roads, you do a 3-inch overlay on a road, it's going to be good for nearly 20 years. With minor maintenance. Parks and Recreation, fire trucks, 20 years. Library, the main costs of the library are going to be good for over 30 years. So for me, it makes sense. The library portion is 30, everything else is 20. So whatever we have to do for the ballot language for that, I like that option. And I think it makes sense to voters, and I think it's the right way to do it.
I mean, it's kind of my thought too. I mean, I have had some conversation with residents, and typically 0.9 to 1 is what people feel comfortable with. It'd be a little harder to explain to people the 20 years versus 30 years, but I think I do agree that library will be there for next 50 years or so. Most of us won't be here in Troy, or at least not in the council, absolutely. But library will be there. So the city will be shining, and I think so. Selling it to the residents that we need a bond for 30 years for the library is, I believe, the right thing to do. Looks minor, but I guess it's still some money, right? I mean, it's a few $100s a year extra between 0.9 and 1.1, especially people with bigger homes. So I do like that idea. I mean, unless makes the bond language too complicated, I guess what I'm understanding is not. I mean, we need to basically go with 30 years per point, this amount, right? So,
it won't break down the 20-year useful life and the 30-year. It'll say up to 30 years. Our way of explaining to the residents that this is what we're going for, but it is basically 30 years for $137 million spread over 30 years. So I feel comfortable with that. So that's kind of where I am.
Councilmember Hunter?
Can we put up the chart with the comparison of how, for the resident?
This one?
Yeah, just to. I do want to express concern about confusing ballot language. I get it, the 0.9 and the 30-year, and it makes sense what that language looks like and how, if the language is this, and then when we're talking to people, I'm having a little bit of a caution about if that will be confusing, and I'm just to look at the difference annually and monthly. I get what you're saying, Dave, but you do nerd out on this stuff, and you can sit and probably rattle off our budget line by line to folks. Confusion about a millage is, I just want to make sure we go in eyes wide open about if something is confusing, that can give people pause. And I'm not sure what it gains for the resident.
It saves a couple bucks a month now. Like, that's the only benefit to doing the .9, is spreading out the library portion over 30 years. I mean, that, right? City staff, I mean, like, there's no, it makes it a little cheaper now, right? Like that, but it doesn't actually, but the interest, you actually pay more over time.
Yeah, you
You're paying
spend more
10
money on
years of it,
interest,
so
that's the
it's-
thing.
That's the drawback of it, that you
when
are
do 20 versus,
paying
that's a
more.
10 years of interest.
See, the confusing part of it is that the ballot language will make sense. It's the confusion of someone saying, they want me to pay for a fire truck for 30 years? Well, that's the language they said they want me to approve.
Yes.
Even if that's not the
That's
case. Like,
what I'm worried about.
That's what I'm.
that's where I get a
Same
little
with 20
bit.
years.
What's that?
Same with 20 years to spend on.
Yeah, but 20 year, I mean,
Versus 30 though.
that's useful life, or that's all the things we can talk about. I don't know, when we talk about trust, we could say, well, from our education standpoint, trust us, this is what we're gonna do. We're not actually gonna do it at the higher rate over 30 years, even though we could, right? Because the ballot language would give us that, right? I worry a little bit about that. I don't think the language itself will be confusing. I think about our goal of what we're doing is a little bit confusing.
That's what I guess
And
that's what I
so-
mean.
That's where I'm,
Can I share something? So I was in the same place. At first, I thought, I don't want a decision that has a 20 and 30% in it, because that's hard to explain. But as I talked to residents, I mean, door to door, sat in kitchens and talked to people about it, people aren't gonna follow all of that. What they follow is how much to my paycheck, how much per month. And I think my only thing I'm wrestling with is, all along, going back to our capital conference, we've talked about a $12 to $15 range. And so that's just what I've already been on the streets talking to people about. So it's not a big difference to say 17, but I just feel like, oh, now I'm changing my tune. And so at the end of the day, what residents, not the people who are running for council, kind of the people who are gonna nitpick in, but like average folks are gonna care about the dollar amount. And maybe we feel like it's not a big difference, but it's what we've been
But it's
talking
a
about.
difference to their pocketbook in the long haul when you're
Yeah,
talking
that's
30 years. And we have smart people in this town that will, am I wrong?
No, well, that's my thought too. It's just, I mean, obviously I speak to people that are gonna be favorable regardless. So, I mean, I don't know that that's the best sample population, but when I'm just thinking of it, 20 year versus 30 year, you end up paying more money on a 30 year in interest. And yes, you may pay shorter, like lower amounts, but then you're gonna pay it over a longer period of time. So ultimately, you're gonna end up paying more money.
But you're factoring, I'm really nerding out here, but you're not factoring the time cost of money, keeping more money now, saving that, a resident can do more with that, they can invest it, they can put it away. I mean, you're giving them more flexibility in this sense. Like, I do a 30-year mortgage with a slightly higher rate, but then I can save more of my money and do more with it. So that's kind of where I'm at. Just saying, it's a $250 a month. I know for the average household, it's not a lot, but I think long-term, it's the best bang for the buck. And also, spreading the cost over the useful life makes sense too. Because then, when in 30 years, the needs are there, if you do 20 years, then you're gonna have this 10-year period where maybe the millage rate drops and then you have to do a big ask again instead of just kind of keeping it going and trying to even the costs out throughout the years of how much it needs every year. It just makes more sense to me, so. I don't have the objection.
Well, I mean, as far as the dollar amount, me personally, I'm completely comfortable, and I think I would definitely support a .9. But I still go back to where I get so many comments about, at the federal level, this big, beautiful bill, and they stuff it with stuff. at the state level, the same thing. And I keep getting this pushback as to, you guys are just gonna bundle one big bill and a bond, and it's gonna just, the dollars make total sense. And I'm all about what we need there. I think it's actually perfect, but I just am, my concern is more, you're talking off your election, more senior citizens vote, they're gonna look at this big dollar amount, which is not big, but 137, and all this work, and I'm like, God, we need both of them. But is it one or is it two? And that's where because I don't want anybody to think I'm not for this, I'm all for it. It's more a matter of strategy to make sure it gets passed. That's where I come from.
Honestly, it's a debate I've had in my head for months, is, one or two.
Because in 1999, wasn't it 2 or 3 that were separated and got passed?
3, I think there were 3, yeah.
It's always strategy.
It's a different electorate in 1999.
A very
Yeah.
I think what we're talking about, and I love it, is we're wanting to be completely honest and completely transparent with our fellow residents about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I can't emphasize enough the fact that we need to do this. I will be as bold as to say, if residents should be angry at us about anything, it's that we didn't do it maybe 4 years ago. We were looking at the school district was going for things. We've dealt with things like COVID. There's been a delay. And that was back when we were only worried about other things other than the library. And I felt anxious that we needed to be doing something. So Mark, I hear you. I have played that game in my mind. Putting separate suggests that it's optional and that we don't need this. But the truth is, the honest conversation with our residents is, we need this. As a council, we have a responsibility to tell you we need this and to put it on the ballot. And we need to be able to explain it, whether we do 0.9, 30 years or years, we need to be able to explain it in a way that they trust and they don't wonder if we're going to be fudging it over years. And then residents, this is what you've been telling us you want and the kind of city that you want. And these are the capital needs that we have. With a capital budget that's doing this, you can vote. But I think to put 2 suggests an untruth, that we don't need to ask for all of it. We do need to ask for all of it. And I don't want to pit the library against public safety, against the quality of life things that have been, from a capital perspective, delayed. So I am hearing you, and I hear your quandary. I want to demonstrate that I'm listening to you. Sure. I'm still back to it should be one ask.
Well, I just go with the fact that it gives the people the option. I think we can still sell both of them, personally. Because we do need it. I agree 100%. I do think, though, the 0.9 at 30 years is actually it's kind of a settlement. It's like, okay, we still need this money. We're going a longer period, and it's going to drop the price a little bit. People are used to 30-year mortgages all day long. So that's kind of hey, we're going to do this, but we're going to go a little longer.
Can I go back to the 0.9 versus 1.1? So I'm going to put out something that is maybe counter to what I just shared, because I do that. I kind of argue with myself.
Me too.
I used to debate, and I debated negative, which is like counterintuitive. So 1.1, also wanting to bear in mind, we may have, we know we have EMS needs. We have, we have some needs coming up. So wondering, maybe a 20-year is better with the idea of, we may have other needs coming and, having something that is a shorter period of time. Maybe there is point to that. I just want to put that out there. It just came to mind. Second thing is, and this may be too late to do, but when we were, I mean, it was different when we were dealing with the capital, I mean, with the library millage, because that was operating, that was not a bond. So I didn't know that we'd have these options, and this is the precisely kind of thing that I would have loved to just have gotten some focus groups together and just, what do residents think? Would they prefer to pay this off in 20 years, which ultimately would be less money, just like when you have a mortgage, or would you do it 30 years? I wasn't aware of these options, so I haven't had this kitchen table conversation, and I'm a deep believer in listening to the public first before I make a decision. It's probably too late to do that, but we did that with the library. When you had two options, 0.9, 0.1, 1.1, we had a few focus groups, and that was very successful because we showed that we listened to people. So I don't know if we have time to spend like a week or two to just, and it doesn't have to be like a scientific kind of focus group, but just, some folks who want to give some input, because I would love to hear what people have to say on that.
I hear that. I mean,
We
yes,
aren't,
and
we aren't
don't have
voting
time.
on it tonight. So
Yeah.
the truth is, we don't vote on this until the language is presented to us at a meeting, so.
So we can do our own focus groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our drop dead date to approve, so in 2 weeks, will we be voting on the actual language? Or will we just kind of be voting on a resolution to go forward and
Sounds like there's not yet clear consensus to have valid language in 2 weeks, so most likely.
At least something to get the conversation going.
Yeah, obviously, we need to know, and the language is not going to be a whole lot different, so we can present that to you at a later date. You do have your 2 meetings in July, so you could potentially, again, sooner is better if you can, but the deadline is actually the 11th, and that is so you have 2 meetings.
11th of August.
I have to transmit it on the 12th.
Right, so.
So let me ask a question then without, because we can all do our own focus groups, but then we're all dependent on one of us sharing what we learned, and that's not always the most effective way, right? Is there a reality from the city management side that if we had a goal to approve ballot language by the second meeting in July, there could be some kind of formal/informal city-led community engagement process just to get some, I'm looking over here, we're looking at Frank, but I know that's a big ask to put together something too formalized, but it would be helpful, I think. I can talk to 50 people in the next hour by myself, and you can, but it helps when it comes from a more communications-focused, organized, education-focused, one set of facts standpoint. I don't like pushing this out too far, but I do think there's a valid. Some people are going to be, you know what, I'd rather pay it a little bit more now to pay it off sooner. People do that all the time. And there's going to be people who say, you know what, I'd rather have a little bit more of my money now because of A, the economic uncertainty, or B, I can invest that extra $250 and make more money. There is definitely going to be likely inconclusive results, I think, from any of these focus groups. But I guess from the perspective of if it gives council members more confidence in putting that vote and voting on that, I don't think that's an unfair ask. If it's something that can be reasonably done without giving the administration too much worry and additional something. Yeah. Well, do you want to add on to that before he answers my question?
I just worry that the trade-off is the time we spend doing that is less time truly communicating, because either or.
I have a question here then, if Troy Times is watching. Of the 7 of us, is there a consensus that we're going to put a $137 million bond on November ballot?
Yeah. I think that's.
Okay. So we've got that educational, that piece that's yes where we're all at, right? So then if it comes down to the exact specifics of it, yes, we could be educating, but is there that much difference? It loses a month potentially of having a calculator on the website of what it's gonna cost you, which I think is the tool that people in the community use more than a focus group, but
I would just say, if we do the 30-20 option, the ballot language is gonna say 30, but then how do we do the calculator? Do we do it with the 30-20 option? Do we do it with just the 30? I do understand Ellen's point. I understand.
It's very confusing, and, you were saying you pay less so that you have more money now. The Hoderick clan, we had a 30-year and we paid extra to pay that thing down to save us interest. I bet if we went into a coffee shop with 30 people, we'd have 15.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I'm not
Before you
trying to
said it,
help.
I was kind of thinking that. I've been doing Troy Talks, I've been speaking to a lot of people. I know everyone at the table has. I'd like council to have that level of comfort with anything we do. If this was something going up in 2026, we could do a lot more. But we had, since the beginning, when we first started, we had this expedited timeline. So we have different markers we want to hit, and I'd hate to try to get right up to a line. I'll do what you folks want me to do, but with that being said, Courtney, is it doable?
If it's
If
not,
that
be
is-
honest, I mean, truthfully.
I mean, if that is the direction of council, it can be done, but I cannot promise that it would, how successful or what type of information would be provided. We would have maybe a week or two to try and gather people for a focus group. We're coming up on the 4th of July holiday. And then say we got a couple focus groups 2 weeks from now, then we take that information, synthesize it, bring it back to council. It is a tight timeline, but if that is something that is very important to council, we can give it the old college try. I just don't want to promise the absolute best, because I fear that it won't work out as well as if we had, even a month, 2 months, 3 months.
Very likely could be the people in this room and some of the people.
What would be?
Sorry.
Okay, I'll go ahead.
Well,
It's
go ahead.
on this, is it?
Go ahead.
Yes.
So it was Bob Bruner, if I'm looking at you, I think you ran the focus groups right up to the end and with the library, you and Kathy Russ, right? Could you speak to, were you running them up right 2 weeks before we had to, and what was it like, what do you think?
They were Zoom
did
because
them.
it was COVID, so that was.
Yeah,
Oh, they were Zoom.
nobody had a summer vacation in 2020, and people were a lot easier to get to participate in. So we're already behind the schedule of where we were in 2020. So Frank, if you go back to the schedule for the 30-year, I think it gets really complicated to try to explain to people like, yeah, it's 1.1 for 20 years and then it falls to less than a half in the last 10 years. Like, just to explain this to people, much less focus group it, is a pretty big ask. Again, what's going to appear on the ballot is that number and that number, and what we're going to tell folks is that, on average, it's going to cost you $14 a month or whatever, and if you've been capped since 1994, you're going to pay a fraction of what your, more recent neighbors are going to be. Like we've talked about before, nobody pays the average, right?
There's no such.
Yeah, there's no such, everybody's above or below. But I have the complexity of the 30-year proposal, trying to explain that to people in focus group that I think is
Maybe I could.
Yeah,
you're selling bonds.
Maybe Rebecca's gonna take the heat off. You gonna take the heat off here?
I'm happy to just focus, because listening to, I think actually that's too much detail. I think a lot of my neighbors would glass over. So maybe we should just ourselves, because I know what, the neighbors, I know what we need to say high level, but to be transparent, and maybe it is on us to get out and be talking to people. So if that helps city management, I'm happy to I will commit to getting out and talking to people.
Kind of agree with that. I think, yeah, like if you really do a scientific study, my guess would be it's almost statistical ties. Half of the people will say 30 years, half of the people will say 20 years. You know, for me, 20 and 30 are both infinity. I've started paying for the rest of my life, kind of a thing, right? So, so if you give me a chance, I'll pay last.
Right for 40 years then?
Yeah, that's 57. So I think it's up to us to make that decision. I would say, I don't think it's the right usage of city administration's resources, and I think we're already behind, and I think we need to.
What about though, like maybe a town hall meeting at the community center, published, advertised?
I think that's after we have approved language. So I just don't think, a town hall, you're not gonna get enough.
It's 4th of July, people are going.
Well, we have until the 28th, so.
I think the use of a town hall or that kind of bigger forum is better when we're telling them what we put on the ballot.
What we're doing, exactly, this road, the details of what we're providing.
So I want to, before I forget, this is an expedited timeline, but we actually have been talking about this for a number of years. So while we put an extra focus and push, 2 years ago, we said we wanted to do something on, well, actually, 2 years ago, we wanted to put something on last year's ballot. And so we're not actually, it's not like this is a new idea. I just want to make that clear to wherever the camera is. It's over here, I think, with me. But it's not that we're rushing this process in any way. There's a timeline that's quick, and city staff has worked really hard to make sure they're backing up and substantiating the numbers that we're asking for. And yes, we're facing a deadline, but this isn't a new problem the city's had. This is not a new conversation that we started with the beginning of your timeline in June of '24. It's gone on much longer than that. So I just wanted to clear that up really quickly. But we're running about a time here. So there was consensus for a $137 million bond proposal on the November ballot. That we know. Is it feasible to, I don't know that the bond language itself is very different between those two. One either says 0.9 with up to 30 years, and the other one says 1.1 for up to 20 years. It's really that different because the projects aren't changing.
Right.
And obviously the interest rates would get adjusted based on those. But is it feasible with that consensus or this conversation, is it enough for you to come back to us in 2 weeks, potentially with 2 different ballot options for us to look at, or is that unrealistic?
Bond counsel, I spoke with her today, and she will, she's happy to provide alternate proposals for you to review. So we could have those as early as the next meeting.
So there could be 2 options on the agenda that then we would be able to give direction. Because most important of all is the communication timing. And you find us bumbling over ourselves because we're working hard to really represent our fellow residents and try to do right by our capital budget and by our fellow residents. So we then have more time to keep talking.
Right.
But we can stay on a timeline that allows, because I think, Mayor, you're correct, we need town halls for the language itself, and we need time to be able to do that. If we could do that, have both for the next agenda, I think that would help me.
Is that?
I mean, a clarification, I guess question from Lodi probably. Is there like once you have that language, is there an approval by the Board of Canvassers? Is that needed, or that's something we assume?
No, this is not a charter amendment, so it is different. And so you can put this on the ballot without, and again, the transmittal date,
those are up to us, but there is no another layer of review, so to speak.
Not on this proposal, as I understand it, and as we're going to be drafting it, which is reflected in the village.
So kind of internally make a decision, well, individually, and then pick one of the 2 in the next meeting is kind of what we're going at, rather than deciding today.
I think, in all fairness, 4 of you did say 0.9, right? And you walked it back a little bit, or at least gave it food for thought, but I mean, so it's, I do
I'm still
think-
there, yeah.
I'd say I'm 1.1.
Yeah,
I would do
no, I-
1.1 today, even though, because, 1.1 is the same away as about a mil as 0.9 is. I mean,
Right.
and it's.
Plus or minus 0.1 from one.
Right, but it's, I think if we had the two options prepared for us, it gives us a couple weeks
Couple weeks to,
to
yeah.
talk to a lot of people. and Put some work in and hear from a lot of people, I'm sure.
0.9 is more, so I keep thinking strategy, winning election, right? 0.9
Which is what we're not.
I know.
We educate. We
Right,
don't-
but 0.9 is like, 99 cents or $1, you know what I mean? And, right, I mean, when you look at your shopping or whatever, just how I think.
No, it's fair, and it's the same amount of money, so and that is, it just depends on how you look at it. Okay. Anything else, Frank, does that?
No, I find the conversation very interesting, how it's kind of split and all the different topics. It's the same thing I've been hearing, so when you guys go out on your own and have these discussions, it's probably gonna fall along those same lines, would be my guess.
You mean they elected us to actually make the decision of what we want to put on the ballot? I can't believe that. Is that how this works?
There's a sample of 7.
Sarcasm, right? No, I think it's, I mean, I appreciate everyone's comments today because I came in with one idea and then I thought, it makes sense. And I think that's good discussion points. I appreciate city staff. I appreciate the creativity of the 0.9 option. Which is not just creativity for creativity's sake, but actually based on useful life, and it makes sense and kind of solved a potential problem with a library that I think our community needs, that is costing more than we initially thought. So I think that's I appreciate not being told there's nothing we can do but make it even more. I like that we have that option to think about, and we have another meeting in 15 minutes, so I'm gonna adjourn this one and say thank you all. Thank you, Frank, thank you everybody on city staff.